Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Congresswoman Jayapal's telephone town hall tonight. The Congresswoman is going to give opening remarks, and then we're going to turn things over to you to take as many of your questions as we can get to in the hour. If you would like to ask a question at any point during tonight's event, dial *3. That's *3 for a question. If you would like to receive the Congresswoman's digital newsletter and her updates via email, dial *6. And we'll get you signed up. Once again, that's *6 to be added to our email newsletter and *3 to ask a question. Now, I want to turn things over to Congresswoman Jayapal to open tonight's event. Congresswoman?
Thank you so much, Chris, and good evening, everybody. Thank you to everyone who has dialed in tonight. We have a lot of people on the line, and we are so glad that we also have people listening on our website and on social media. It's a true honor to represent our community, to serve Washington's 7th District, and to be your voice in Congress. And I'm so grateful to you for re-electing me in November with the most votes of any member in the House of Representatives. Now, I know that all of you have heard many of you have heard that I received a positive COVID test on Monday night. Unfortunately, I had the sense that there were times during the attacks of January 6th when we were in a secure lockdown room and that might be the case. And so I quarantined immediately after that, starting on Thursday. I'm happy to report that I'm feeling much better today, and I hope that continues. So I want to thank you all for your thoughts, all the well wishes, and all the prayers that many of you have been sending. I so appreciate it, and I'm hopeful that I and my husband will get through this as well as we possibly can. So let's dive in. There's a lot to talk about. The new session of Congress just began at an unprecedented moment in our country's history, a moment where we face a deadly public health crisis, a devastating economic crisis, and a dangerous crisis in our democracy, each made dramatically worse by a president who not only refuses to address these crises in any meaningful way, but also someone who fuels them. And so I want to begin with our democracy, given the past 8 days. On January 6th, we experienced the most violent, deadly, and destructive assault on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. Insurrectionists stormed Congress, killing several people, including Capitol police officers. They placed bombs throughout Washington, D.C. They ransacked the Capitol and fired guns into the House floor. They had Confederate flags, nooses, pipes, tear gas, bulletproof vests, and zip ties to take hostages. And they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," while also hunting Nancy Pelosi. I know all of this because I was trapped in the gallery above the House floor as it occurred. We took cover under the seats. We had to pull out gas masks because tear gas was being used, and the Capitol Police barricaded the doors with furniture and had their guns drawn. We were eventually told that we had to quickly exit, took flights of stairs down to a safer location. And as we did exit that chamber, we passed the insurrectionists who had been pounding on the doors of the very gallery that we had been trapped in, trying to get inside. They were being held spread-eagled on the floor and at gunpoint. We knew that the first thing we had to do was finish the work of certifying the election. And so, as soon as the Capitol was as secure as could be, around 8 o'clock the night of January 6th, we went back to the chamber so we could finish the work that we are sworn to do constitutionally. At 3:45 a.m. on January 7th, we did exactly that. There is absolutely no question that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as president and vice president in just 6 days. But we have to look at why these insurrectionists carried out this attack. It is clear as day. It is indisputable that Donald Trump incited this deadly attack. He told these domestic terrorists, many associated with white nationalist groups, to, quote, stand by. Then he urged them to, quote, fight like hell. Then he proclaimed at the rally just before the mob descended on the Capitol, he proclaimed, we are going to the Capitol. The insurrectionists followed these orders from the President of the United States and carried out a violent attack on our country with the clear intent of overtaking Congress, overturning this election, and undermining our democracy. That is why I called for the immediate removal of Donald Trump to protect our country, our Constitution, and our very democracy. I helped pass a resolution on Tuesday night that urged Vice President Mike Pence to convene the cabinet, to implement the 25th Amendment, and to remove the president. I was also an early co-sponsor on a resolution impeaching Donald Trump again. Yesterday, with bipartisan support, in fact, the most bipartisan support ever in an impeachment in U.S. history, we passed that impeachment resolution and sent a clear message that the American people will not stand by and allow our democracy to be turned into an autocracy. I am now calling on the Senate to immediately convict Trump and remove him from office. But the accountability for this attack on our country cannot stop with Donald Trump. We must prosecute all of the insurrectionists. We also have to thoroughly investigate what happened to allow their takeover of the Capitol to occur. And we must reckon with the racism and white supremacy that was so clearly and painfully on display last week. We know that peaceful Black and brown and indigenous protesters would never have been allowed even remotely near the Capitol. And yet these individuals, armed with tactical gear, clearly stating their purpose in social media for days before the event, were almost welcomed into the Capitol. Our country and our democracy will have to recover from these deep wounds, and it will not be easy. But I know we will get through this because we are a strong and resilient people. We will do the people's work to ensure that justice and peace prevail, and we will preserve and protect our democracy today and always. As this crisis in our democracy is occurring, I know that our public health and economic crises continue for so many across our country, including many of you that are on the line tonight. In Washington and across America, millions of families continue to experience pain, devastation, and hopelessness from the ongoing pandemic. I promise you, we will do everything possible to help you withstand these crises and to get relief quickly in your pocket. That's why I've been fighting for a robust COVID-19 aid package. I'm proud to have led progressives in uniting to secure survival checks and enhanced unemployment assistance after they were originally left out of the relief package last month. I'm continuing to fight for more money, at least $2,000 in total of survival checks, and my Paycheck Recovery Act, which would send grants to businesses of all sizes to cover payroll, rehire workers, and help with operating expenses. The package that we were ultimately able to get signed into law in December includes $600 in survival checks per adult making less than $75,000 and $600 per child, including finally making mixed status families eligible and ensuring that they could retroactively receive the relief check that they were previously excluded from. Also included an additional $300 per week of expanded unemployment assistance, nutrition assistance, rental assistance, an extension of the eviction moratorium, support for small businesses in our community, and support for paid sick leave, as well as aid for education and childcare while expanding the Pell Grant program. It also included broadband access so that students and parents could get online. And it included some, but not nearly enough, state assistance for vaccine distribution and other COVID-related needs. I want to be clear that this is only the very beginning. With Democrats controlling the House and now the Senate after historic wins in Georgia, a top priority of mine will be to work urgently with the Biden-Harris administration to ensure that we fully review and strengthen the relief bill proposal that was released just tonight by President-elect Biden. And we need to make sure that whatever we pass meets the scale of this devastating crisis. At the heart of it is putting money in people's pockets, keeping people in their homes, sending grants to businesses to cover payroll and rehire workers, and making bold investments in states, cities, and local communities across America. I also want to ensure that we guarantee health care, including the vaccine and all COVID-related care, to everyone in this country. This is personal for me, as many of you know, not only because I myself am now positive for COVID, but because every single day, 3,200 people are dying of COVID-19 on average. That's just the average for the past week. So anyone entrusted with the job of representing their community in Congress has to do everything in their power to keep their constituents and colleagues safe. And if they refuse, they too must face consequences. I think many of you have heard me talk about what happened to me. Only hours after the deadly assault on our Capitol, many of my Republican colleagues still recklessly refused to take the bare minimum precaution and simply wear a mask as we waited for hours in a crowded room, creating a super spreader event on top of a domestic terrorist attack. They even selfishly mocked colleagues and staff who offered them one. And I know that I tested negative just the day before the January 6th attack. That night, I tested negative. So my positive COVID-19 test result was absolutely because of that super spreader event that we were locked down in. I have called for any member who refuses to wear a mask in the Capitol to be immediately fined. I spoke to Chairman Jim McGovern of the Rules Committee about it and to the Speaker, and I'm glad to say that this common sense public health precaution was adopted by the House on Tuesday night. Before I take your questions, which as Chris mentioned, you can ask by dialing *3 at any time, I want to close on a positive note, a note about what we can accomplish together in this new Congress. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, which I proudly chair, recently helped to introduce the People's Agenda. This is a transformative roadmap for the first 6 months of 2021 that puts people first. We developed it with grassroots groups, organizing groups, labor unions, the Poor People's Campaign, many, many other partners. And we want to make sure that we are united and clear on what we are fighting for in this first 6 months. This bold plan has 7 key planks. Each one is huge, so I urge you to go to our website and check out all of the detail of this legislative agenda. First, we have to provide COVID relief that meets the scale of the crisis, and there's a lot in that one. Second, we have to put people back to work, giving workers more power and transitioning to a clean, renewable energy economy. And by the way, that includes making sure that we pass not only a bold infrastructure package, a green, renewable energy infrastructure package, but also a families infrastructure package that provides families with the basic infrastructure that they need to be successful. Third, we need to ensure health care for everyone. Fourth, we need to defend and expand voting rights, strengthen democracy, and end corruption. Fifth, dismantling racism, white supremacy, and inequality in all institutions must be at the top of our agenda. And yes, that includes humanely reforming our immigration system. Sixth, we need to end endless wars and invest in diplomacy and peace. And seventh, we need to end corporate greed and corporate monopolies. Now, I'm looking forward to going into more detail about all of these issues and others that you want to discuss tonight, but I wanted to just keep my comments to a minimum so we could get to your thoughts and questions. If you want to ask a question at any point during the town hall, just dial *3. Thank you again for joining me this evening, and I'll turn things back over to Chris to help us go through the questions.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks, Congresswoman. It was good to hear your updates on the last week and on the road ahead. If you want to receive a regular email update from Congresswoman Jayapal, you can subscribe to our digital newsletter by dialing *6, and we'll get you signed up. As we go to our first question, I want to remind everyone on the line that you can ask a question this evening. All you have to do is dial *3, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. The first question tonight is going to come from Lynn. Lynn is dialing in from Edmonds. And Lynn, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you'll have the opportunity to ask your question about getting President Trump out of office. Lynn, you should be unmuted.
Hello?
Hi, Lynn. We can hear you.
Okay. I've not done this before, so this is kind of new to me. I don't think that there's enough pressure to get the other side in the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, to get rid of Trump. And he's already moving on a lot of environmental things here at the last week of his presidency. And so I would just like to see if there's anything we can do to stop him, at least on the environmental front, because he has it in for all of us in every way he can.
Yeah,
my question is, what
much.
shall we do?
Yeah, thanks so much, Lynn, and I'm so glad you joined for the first time. That's awesome. We want people to use these teletown halls, even if they've never done it before, so thank you for that. Look, Donald Trump has been doing horrific things on the environment and on immigration, on every single issue since the day he got in, and he has not stopped in this last week. So we know that there are many things we're going to have to overturn. At this moment, the big concern for me, I will be honest with you, is not even the policies that he's trying to, get through, but the fact that he controls the nuclear codes, that he controls law enforcement, that he controls intelligence agencies, and that he has just incited insurrectionists. And so he is a danger to our national security. That is why we have done everything in our power in the House to get Donald Trump out of the White House. And it's why it was so important for the House to pass a resolution calling on Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. Obviously, he said he wouldn't do that. We don't have the ability right now to force Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. We also then impeached Donald Trump for the second time to ensure that he leaves office and has no possibility of returning to office in the future. Now, Mitch McConnell has said he's not going to reconvene the Senate before January 19th. And so that means that the impeachment trial may end up waiting until January 20th. And that is not, we are still extremely worried about the danger Donald Trump can do in office. But we also have to make sure that we act on impeachment, because we cannot trust Donald Trump to do the right thing. We cannot trust that he will not misuse the powers of the office in the last 7 days or 6 days that we have. And we have to make sure we hold him accountable and that he never holds office again. So that is what we're focused on now. And once we take over the Senate, which fantastic that Democrats will now control the House, the Senate, and the White House, then we will be able to start the process of undoing so much of the damage that Donald Trump has done on the environment and so many other areas, and also make sure that we build back better, as Joe Biden says, and really create a country that honors and respects opportunity for everybody.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Lynn, for asking that question. Our next question is going to come from Kathy, who is calling in from Seattle. Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. And Kathy's question was about President-elect Biden's $2 trillion plan. So, Kathy, I've just unmuted you.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. And I just wanted to ask a question. how do we as individuals or myself go about pressuring the Senate to accept the $2 trillion package that Vice President Biden's presenting? Is there a phone bank I can call like I did with the Georgia election or something like that I can get involved and put some pressure on just as an individual?
Absolutely, Kathy. You're talking to a long-term community organizer, so I love that question. And thank you so much for asking it. Here's the thing. We are just reviewing now the proposal that Joe Biden put out and making sure that we also work with the Biden administration to just strengthen it, make sure that it meets the scale of the crisis. But as soon as we have a proposal that we all, and I think people will want to be involved in that as well. We're already hearing from, and I'm already hearing from people about what you want to make sure is in this package, what we want to strengthen in the package that Joe Biden just put out, and then how we pass it. So there will absolutely be lots of opportunities for people to be involved in making sure that we are getting survival checks into the pockets of Americans, that we are expanding public health insurance, that we are investing in this robust and coordinated vaccination plan that also ensures that our most vulnerable and marginalized are treated equitably. So here's what you can do. Please keep writing and calling your representative, that's me, and your senators with your stories. And tell us your stories. If you have stories that relate to what is going to go into this plan, tell us. If you've got relatives in other parts of the country, particularly with Republican representatives or senators, ask them to call in, because we are going to need as much public pressure as possible. It is the movement on the outside and the inside that actually makes things happen. So please continue to show up in these kinds of town halls, and then make sure that we are hearing from you, and try to get as many people as you can to do the same. So I think there will be lots of opportunities for many of the grassroots groups that are working on these policy proposals. So keep your eyes open for that, and also, of course, from us for actions that we might be calling for.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question is coming from Melody. Melody, I'm going to unmute you now, and you'll be able to ask your question.
Good evening, Congresswoman. I want to thank you for your tenacity and persistence in representing the people. And my question is, where is the interest for the Latino and Hispanic families that are locked in cages at the borders? Is there any spotlight still left on them, and what is the plan to release these people?
Absolutely. Melody, thank you so much for that. As you know, this is near and dear to my heart. I spent 12 years before coming to Congress as an immigrant rights activist, helping to start the largest immigrant advocacy organization in Washington State. And in Congress, I serve as the vice chair of the Immigration Subcommittee. I was the first one down to talk to the families that had been separated, the parents that had been separated from their kids. The truth is, we all know this horrifying story of President Trump creating a humanitarian crisis at the border, stranding tens of thousands of asylum seekers there, people who are at risk of horrific violence in a detention system that's inhumane. And it will be difficult to immediately begin processing everyone who's been waiting, especially given COVID. It's also important to note that the infrastructure that had been in place at the border has been completely decimated by the Trump administration. And I want to be clear that those systems, the immigration system overall, was broken even before Trump, but Trump took everything that was there and completely destroyed it and put it to work for the worst possible purposes. So we have already been working with the Biden administration and the people on the Biden administration immigration team to identify all of the many things that we're going to have to do at the border and at the interior to bring justice to our immigration system. I am confident that the Biden administration will work expeditiously to expedite as much as possible the processing of people at the border. And first, prioritizing people that are vulnerable to harm in Mexico. And then we are also pushing very hard for Joe Biden to use this as an opportunity to re-envision a truly welcoming, humane system to review people coming to seek safety. But I just have to be honest about the scale of the reforms that we need. I mean, this is a massive task because Donald Trump used immigration and a system that was already broken for decades, but he used it as a political tool to really fuel hatred. And so we're going to have to reckon with all of that. I want to just say I'm very excited because later this month I'm going to be introducing the Roadmap to Freedom. This is a progressive vision for immigration reform. It reestablishes the United States as a beacon of hope and humanitarian protection for those seeking safety on our shores, including by rebuilding our asylum system and building welcoming centers at the border. And we're introducing this with the support of the major immigrant rights organizations around the country, including One America in our state, and very, very excited to be putting forward, finally, a proactive, positive vision of immigrants and immigration in America.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Melody, for that question. Our next question comes from Tim. Tim, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Hey, how's it going, Pramila? I was just calling. I'm a freshman at. So I'm kind of nervous. I'm a freshman at Franklin High School, and I was just calling to ask for the next administration for 2021. Since we have the House, the Senate, and everything for this new COVID and how to move forward. By the way, I love this whole squad and everything. It gives me inspiration for what I want to do in the future. But pretty much while I'm working to go to college, my parents, for COVID, my father especially, he's been unemployed, and they say not to worry and everything, but I hear them arguing when they know I'm playing video games. But could you not commit, but could you just say when you're at the desk in government and just make sure to bring up because from July and to December, my dad was kind of getting screwed just because state unemployment isn't that much. But if you could put the word in for retroactive unemployment from the July 31st when it ended to December, because my parents are getting really nervous about losing things. I know y'all forwarded the eviction day and everything and the state laws and stuff, but that would really, really help if you put your word in and said don't forget the people from unemployment from that only had state subsidies and make sure to help them out. So just retroactive.
Yeah.
That was just my question.
Yeah, got you. Tim, thank you so much for that. And I'm so sorry for all the hardship your family has been going through. I have been fighting for retroactive unemployment assistance for, when the unemployment assistance that we had passed in the CARES Act expired, and then Republicans stopped us from passing any kind of a package until December. We know that there were a lot of families who were hurt with that period of time where they were getting no assistance. And that's part of the reason we were pushing for bigger survival checks and more assistance. I absolutely will do whatever I can to see how we make sure that we start to bring families back to whole, whether that means the retroactive unemployment piece, but also additional assistance. I mean, we have been so skimpy, so stingy, frankly, on what we've done to help families in America. And we start, I probably don't need to remind you, you sound like you know this already, but we start with a safety net system that is so much worse than most developed countries in the world. And there are many countries in the world that already are taking care of expenses that Americans pay for, like healthcare or childcare. And then on top of that, other countries have much more generous expanded unemployment benefits all the time. And when the crisis hit, many of them actually passed my policy similar to my Paycheck Recovery Act, where somebody like your dad would actually have been able to stay employed by the company because the government was directly subsidizing the jobs and preventing people from getting unemployed. Or if he had gotten unemployed, he would have been eligible for unemployment assistance for as long as the crisis continued without these breaks like we have. So I will do everything I can to just keep families like yours at the front of our priority, because at the end of the day, we have to take care of our people. And thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Tim, for that question. Our next question is going to come from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I'm unmuting you now, and so you are now live.
Hi, I live in California, and I live in a mobile home community, and I want to know what you guys are going to be doing as far as gun control. I was a kindergarten teacher for 13 years, and I think that we should have gun safety courses from kindergarten to 12th grade. And every year they learn something appropriate for their age so that this unnecessary slaughter of people we can do something about it. What do you think?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your question. And also thanks for educating our young people. I really believe our teachers are our heroes in this country. So to all the teachers on the line, all the educators on the line, thank you so much. So we already have several bills that are ready to go that we passed in the last Congress, and that includes universal background checks. It includes a fix to the Charleston loophole. And we have a number of really, bills that create a strong foundation. And then we're working on some more, like banning semi-automatic weapons, encouraging safe storage, actually similar to what's been done in Seattle, and more. So, I think that early education is an interesting idea, but what I really want to focus on is making sure that we have strong laws to prevent gun violence from happening as well. And so I think that will be our focus in Congress. Now, the challenge with many of these things is, even though we took the majority in the Senate, it is a narrow majority, as you know, it's a 50-50 with Vice President to be Kamala Harris providing the deciding vote. So that means that not only do we have to keep all of our own senators, all of the 50 senators on the Democratic side together on anything, but also in the Senate, you need to have a 60-vote majority on things that don't have to, if we're not using budget reconciliation that aren't financial, then we need a 60-vote majority. And so that is the challenge with any of these things. But I can promise you that the carnage from guns in this country has got to stop and got to be a priority for us. And our young people in Florida and so many other places, as well as our gun reform coalitions and our sensible gun reform coalitions in Washington State, and the people's initiatives that we've passed in the state, have set an example for the kinds of things that we should be doing, but we just need so much more, and it needs to be federal. It can't just be at the state level. So thank you so much for that question and for all of the work that you've been doing on this topic.
Thank you, and thanks, Elizabeth, for dialing in. Our next question is coming from Douglas, who is calling from Burien. Douglas from Burien, I'm going to unmute you now, and you are live.
Okay, I've got what may be a tough and question to ask, but going forward, we've had a little bit of time to calm down since the 6th, and I honestly believe we have to hold everyone accountable that was involved, including members of Congress that stood on the stage and spoke with Trump to rile up the crowd. However, eventually, after we've gain some measure of justice. What are we going to do? Do we have any plan for how to civilly engage the people who were directly or indirectly responsible and refused to take responsibility for their actions, not only on January 6th, but for events leading up to that? I don't know how we live together, because we can't put everybody in prison, and there has to be some sort of truth and reconciliation or something, so that we can find a way to. And I know that this may sound like a Republican talking point, and I am so angry with the people that instigated this and engaged in it. But we do have to live together.
Yeah. Thank you, Douglas, for that question. And I can hear the pain in your voice as you're talking about it. And I just think that's important for all of us to recognize, the pain and the trauma of what happened on January 6th and the fear and really the threat that still exists. So I think that there is a deep reckoning and a healing that will need to happen in order for us to uphold our democracy and become a more united society. The truth is that many of my Republican colleagues prioritized their loyalty and complicity to Donald Trump over the Constitution, over the safety of others, over all of the values that underlie this democracy. And also, there is a very clear, I just have to be frank, this was the rising of the Confederacy that we saw on January 6th. And if our country is not going to deal with the history of racism in this country and the fact that while we thought we had made enormous steps forward with the Civil Rights Movement, with the Civil Rights Act, with the Voting Rights Act, I will tell you that the people that invaded the Capitol want to overturn all of that. And Donald Trump was a big part of elevating that and making it publicly okay to say and do things that weren't seen as publicly okay before he got there. I'm not saying those things weren't there underlying much else, but the reality is that he incited, fueled, and drove the rise of white nationalism, white supremacy, and violence in this country. So now we have to figure out how to go back to saying those things are wrong. Obviously, the election was a big part of that. Getting him out of the White House was a big part of that, because now he doesn't have that bully pulpit. But he is still going to be out there, and the people who follow him like a cult are still going to be out there. And when we think about justice, there can't be justice without accountability. And there can't be reconciliation without truth. And so those are the pieces that we are going to have to work on and set a different standard and a different example. And I also think that we have to adjust the curricula in our schools. And this sort of goes back in a different way to the question before about education in the schools. I think we need to do education about democracy, about racism. Our textbooks don't even talk about, the violent taking of land from our native people, or about racism in the full way that we need to talk about it. And I don't think that we as a country can move forward in a united way unless we begin to reckon with some of that. So this is not going to be a quick path forward. And I'll just tell you something quite honestly that I'm struggling with myself. There's a lot of talk about working across the aisle and being bipartisan. And I have a lot of bills I've done over the years that have been bipartisan. They've been with members of the Republican Party. I have worked with people on the other side, and we've passed bills together. We've been civil to each other. But I just have to tell you that we have a new breed of people in the United States Congress, people who have been elected as QAnon conspiracy theorists, who are refusing to go through metal detectors, magnetometers on the House floor before they go onto the House floor, and bringing their loaded weapons onto the House floor. So I don't know the answer to your question. What I do know is that we are going to have to do everything in our power to take on some of the skeletons in our closet as a country, and to take on the underlying inequality and injustice that exists. Because I do think that Donald Trump is both a symptom and a cause, a problem in and of himself and a symptom. He got elected because there was a lot of dissatisfaction with democracy in our country to start with, because there was so much inequality. 40% of Americans didn't even have $400 in their bank account. They don't trust government because so much of politics has become about loyalty to biggest corporations and to special interests. That's why I don't take any corporate PAC money for my election. I want to reform the whole system. That's why I've supported so much of the anti-corruption legislation and written so much of it along with Elizabeth Warren and others. So we're really going to have to convince people that government is here to work, to really equalize opportunity for everyone and work for the people. And we're going to have to take on all of these different pieces that have now splintered and split our country in such destructive ways. So my request to you is just to hang in there, to continue to have these honest conversations, including with the people that you love and the people that are around you who are saying things that are not true and vilifying people who should never be vilified. That's also a part of this, is what each one of us does in our own daily lives, with our kids, with our family members, and with our colleagues. So thank you so much for the question. It's a tough one, and I'm just trying to be as honest as I can about what it's going to take. And it's going to take every single one of us doing this work on a daily basis.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Douglas, for that question. Our next question is coming from Brian. Brian, I've unmuted you, and you're live now.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Jayapal, for all the things that you've done and all the work that you continue to do. I'm a cis white male, and so consequently I get a whole lot of privilege. I also have the point that you just got done talking about is directly relevant to what my question is. There have been programs in like Chicago for gang violence, where people who have been involved in gangs change their perspective, and because they had the street cred, they would be able to go out and they'd be able to talk with folks, and that funding got cut, and there were increases in violence. And some people speculate it's because that funding was cut because it was extremely cost effective and very effective on a personal basis. I myself have suffered from white male supremacy, in that I was abused for years by somebody who happened to be an upstanding white member of society, and there were zero consequences to him. And I'm still living with the effects of that today. And I am recognizing former governor of California's Arnold Schwarzenegger's recent statement, where he talked about what he suffered as a result of white nationalist violence in the Second World War with what he personally experienced. Do we have any ideas about how we can use or fund some programs to help bring not just accountability in terms of direct punishment to people that perpetrate violence, but also how to get people out of that cycle of violence.
Yeah, Brian, that is such a insightful and thoughtful question and observation, and I want to say I'm sorry for what you've gone through, and also thank you for sharing that with us in this context. You're asking how we reform white supremacy, and I think that there are a few different things we have to think about. One is that, our law enforcement has not enforced any of the things that would normally be done against white supremacist groups. A year ago, Acting Director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, came and testified before me on Judiciary Committee and said the biggest threat to our national security was domestic terrorism related to white nationalism and white supremacy. And yet, we've done nothing about it. And so I do think that there's a law enforcement effort here that has to be about breaking up these violent white supremacist cells that exist all over the country now. And we're seeing it in Washington State. But the second part is what you're talking about, which is what are the ways that we can educate people before they get drawn into that? And what are the ways that for people who are drawn into this, that we can bring them out of it? Because I am of the belief, and maybe it's just, I'm an organizer, so I'm an eternal optimist, and I try to see the good in people, and I try to believe that change is possible. People aren't static human beings. They can change, and they can change for the better, but they need the forces to be with them. They need the support and the resources. And so I think what you're talking about is really interesting, and there are some programs around the country that do some of that work with these white supremacist groups, but not nearly enough, because frankly, a lot of our law enforcement and policies have targeted Black people in gangs or immigrants, who have been put into detention or things like that in negative ways, not in positive ways. And so now I think we need to turn to this question of white supremacists and violent white supremacists and really think about what is the rehabilitation plan? What is the education that goes in before people can get drawn into this? What do we need to teach people about our history and about January 6th that will really help to make sure that people aren't getting drawn into this? And then what do we do to rehabilitate? So I want to thank you for that compassionate view and say that I think these are some of the things that we are really going to have to put resources into, funding into, and clear thought into as we go forward.
Thank you for that response, and thank you, Brian, for that question. Our next question is coming from Karen and Bill. They are calling from Edmonds.
Yes.
So Karen and Bill from Edmonds, you are live now.
Hi. Hello, Pramila. Bill wants to go first, I think.
Hi, thank you very much.
Bill and Karen, I think we might have lost you. Are you still there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Hi, Bill.
Hey, thank you very much. I wanted to say apologize for the events last week. We saw you on TV, and you looked frightened, and we felt so bad for you. I'm glad that we are glad that you're feeling better. We find it outrageous that your fellow lawmakers won't wear masks. That is so rude and so idiotic that it's just beyond comprehension. Okay, I'm on to my question. We're concerned about the vaccine. Why are there so many problems getting it distributed? And what are you doing to ramp up the distribution and actually getting the vaccine into people's arms? I have a 95-year-old mom. She lives with my sister. We need to get her a vaccine, and we're wondering, who do we call? How do we do it? Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you having this town hall. All right, that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And Karen, did you have something you wanted to say as well? And then I'll take the answer.
topic, I would say.
Okay.
Again, thank you for all your fantastic work. I'm
Yeah.
so admiring all of the things you're about.
You're awesome.
I wish we could do something about Mitch McConnell not having this impeachment trial. Why does the session have to close? Can't he call them back? I wish that would happen, but of course I doubt.
Yes. Well, you and me both, and absolutely he could call them back, but he's not willing to do it, and that is the challenge. Bill, I want to thank you for your comments, and both of you for your support. That moment on TV, I didn't even know that was being televised until later when I looked at my phone and saw all the text messages and the social media messages and the emails from people, calls into my office, and I'm so grateful to have so much support in the district. And I'm sorry that everyone was so worried about me. It was a tough moment. So anyway, the good news is I'm here, I'm getting better, and nobody's going to keep me down. That's who I am. So on vaccines, the main issue with the public health response to COVID as a whole has been that the Trump administration, Donald Trump and his entire administration and the Republicans have refused to take responsibility for any kind of a real robust coordinated national response. So, we're seeing the same issues that we saw for getting enough PPE to our essential workers, for getting any contact tracing in place, for getting any sort of a real testing strategy in place. It's always been fragmented and underfunded. And now we're seeing the same thing for vaccine distribution, which means that every state is for itself. There's no centralized vaccine distribution plan. It means that some states haven't prioritized marginalized and vulnerable people, like those in long-term facilities. It means that seniors are having trouble knowing how to make an appointment or when the vaccine is available. And in Washington state, we've also been dealing with the fact that we were promised a certain number of vaccines to start with, and then suddenly they changed their mind and said that we didn't have that amount. Now we've been told we're going to get it, but it's been a real challenge. And so that's why the Biden administration has prioritized a national vaccination program in what they released tonight. Their broad outline really prioritizes this national vaccination program that is going to ensure that everyone can quickly access the vaccine free of charge and without cost sharing. Washington State has done a really good job of approaching this pandemic in a coordinated way since day one, with a governor who listens to science. But that being said, with no support from the federal government, there's just a long way to go. Now, we're going to need to make sure that when somebody becomes eligible for the vaccine, they know it's their turn, they know how to get the vaccine, and they're able to easily get it. So for your mom, the Department of Health has announced that they're going to be moving on to the next group, B1, in the coming days, which will allow all people 70 years or older, or those 50 years or older who are in multi-generational households, to get a vaccine. And so for this next group, and actually for all the future groups, what you can do is go to findyourphasewa. That's findyourphasewa.org, and you can schedule an appointment there and find out where to go. And if you have any trouble with that, please make sure you call our office, and Chris will make sure you have the right phone number for the office. And we also have constituent service staff who can make sure that you get that assistance. And I should just say, our staff is amazing. My staff is absolutely phenomenal. They have such caring, beautiful, generous, smart, hardworking individuals. And our constituent services work has been one of the highlights of my 4 years in Congress, where we've been able to return over $4 million to constituents. We've been able to help you with your questions about getting whatever assistance you're eligible for, and also navigating federal bureaucracy. So we are happy to try to help you on this as well if you have any trouble with that for your mom, because she certainly should be eligible for that vaccine with this B1 group. So please let us know how we can help if you have trouble with that. And thank you again for your support and your question.
Thank you so much, Bill and Karen, for joining us tonight. Our next question comes from Nick. Nick, you are now unmuted and you are live.
Thanks. Thanks so much for hosting this town hall. It's been really informative. My question is about climate change and specifically the report today from NASA that 2020 tied or maybe even beat the hottest year on record in 2016, and specifically about how the Cascadia region here in Seattle is likely to see fewer impacts from climate change than other parts of the country, and what we can do to host all of the potential internally displaced persons coming from places where there are wildfires and hurricanes and flooding and so on over the next couple of decades, and what we can do even more at the federal level to prevent a lot of those impacts in the coming years. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, so much for that question. This is an incredibly important issue, and we've been working very closely also with the Green New Deal Coalition and with our colleagues within Congress to put together some truly bold and urgent actions around climate. So the Congressional Progressive Caucus had put together our recommendations, and then we worked with the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis to come up with priority legislative actions to take in the 117th Congress to address exactly the issues you're talking about. So this plan, the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis report, is the first ever congressional plan for addressing climate change. I'm sort of embarrassed to say that, but that's the truth. It is a strong starting point, but I'll just say that it's just the beginning. There are areas that the Progressive Caucus had identified. Not all of them made it in, but many of them did. And so with Democrats controlling the House, Senate, and the White House, and with President-elect Biden's pledge to make climate change one of his top priorities, I think we're better placed than ever before to take the kind of bold action that we need to address the climate crisis. And that means, acting quickly to shift our country to renewable energy economy, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector and the industrial sector and agriculture and our buildings. We can rapidly scale up technologies like electric vehicles, mass transit. I've been very, very drawn into the whole area of regenerative agricultural practices, as well as building electrifications. And as we do that, we're going to have to make sure that equity and justice and communities of color and those that are most disproportionately burdened by climate change are at the center of all of those actions, because our low-income communities, communities of color, tribal, indigenous communities are really on the front lines and need to be at the table both for developing the solutions and also gaining the benefits. I am going to be introducing a bill that will be part of a broader package of climate actions that I'm really excited about, that is about building resilience in communities and really training resilience workers to deal with the rebuilding that has to happen after these enormous natural disasters are occurring in our communities across the country. So keep your eye out for that. When you sign up for our newsletters, you'll get that kind of information as well. But we're really excited about that. We've actually been working on the bill for about a year because it got interrupted with so much of what happened in COVID. But we're very excited and hope to introduce it relatively soon in the 117th. So thank you, Nick, for drawing attention to this urgent issue that we have to confront quickly.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Nick, for joining us. Our next question is going to come from Katie in Edmonds. Katie, you're unmuted and you should be live.
Hi, thank you, Congresswoman, for Representative for your service. My question is, I am very concerned about the possibility of other members of Congress aiding and abetting the insurrectionists. Are you confident that there will be an investigation that will uncover if that is true?
Katie, thank you for that question. And it's great to see how many people we have from Edmonds on the line tonight. That's fabulous. I am confident that there will be an investigation and that we will ferret out the members of Congress who aided and abetted the insurrectionists. I really am. We have to investigate. We have to ensure there's accountability. I can tell you right now that there isn't a lot of trust between us as colleagues, as members of Congress, and it makes me incredibly sad. But we've all seen the videos that have been circulating about the members of Congress who apparently, according to one of the organizers of the insurrection, that there were members of Congress who were planning this attack with the organizers of the attack. And so we are looking into all of those. There has to be an investigation. But the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that if there are members of Congress who that no one can serve as a member of Congress who has been a part of those kinds of efforts to overthrow the government or insurrection. And so there are mechanisms for us to remove people who are found to have participated. And as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, I'm going to be pushing very hard for us to make sure we do this investigation quickly and that we use every mechanism, every tool that we have to hold them accountable. So this is about, it's not enough to just censure people. I've joined a resolution that's led by my friend and colleague Hank Johnson to remove from Congress Mo Brooks, who was one of the people who helped incite the violence and made public comments on the stage. But there are others, and we're going to have to really do the full work to make sure that no person who serves in Congress, no one can serve in Congress who was part of this insurrection. So thank you for the question, and I promise you we're not letting that go.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Congresswoman. Well, we've come to our hour, and so I'm going to sneak in one last question from Marilyn in Seattle. Marilyn, you have our last question of the evening. Go ahead.
Oh, that is fantastic. First of all, thank you for doing this, and I just wish I could give you a big hug for everything you've been through, and thank you for fighting for us. I wanted to talk about cash rental assistance during COVID. My husband and I are small housing providers, and there are a lot of small mom and pops who are in real trouble. But for many of us, there is no money, and we're just taking hit after hit, facing foreclosure and forced sales, and it's going to hurt renters too. I wanted to point out that eviction bans don't put any money in people's bank accounts to cover their housing expenses. And the $100 million provided by the CARES Act for rent relief was distributed 6 months late in Washington State. And so it really wasn't accessible to many residents or housing providers. So I just really wanted to push immediate cash assistance that is sufficient to meet the needs, the great needs of anyone who has faced job loss related to COVID, and to avoid delays in distribution, because we just need to have this, immediately accessible. And I would also just like to hear you highlight small housing providers more in your remarks. Thank you so much.
Yes, Marilyn, thank you so much. And I could not agree with you more. I mentioned earlier my Paycheck Recovery Act, which I introduced in April of last year. And that would have given employers grants to keep people on payroll throughout the pandemic. So it wouldn't have been loans. You wouldn't have had to go through banks. It would have just been a direct grant from the Treasury to the employer to both pay some operating expenses to keep the business open and also to keep people on payroll, because then if people were kept on payroll, they would continue to be able to pay their rent and their mortgage. And ultimately, I think that would have been a far better solution than everything we did. Now, that said, we are where we are. So the COVID bill that was signed into law last month included $25 billion to help families and individuals pay rent and utility bills. And it also included assistance, direct assistance to mom and pop property owners like you of all sizes so that you could continue to cover costs, because you're absolutely right. Just, the eviction moratorium doesn't allow people to pay, and the small mom and pops like you, landlords, are going to end up, if they aren't already, in this terrible position. So that was the beginning of assistance, but I've been continuing to push really hard for policies that would put money directly in people's pockets so that they can put food on the table and pay rent and more. It's just not enough to put evictions on hold. And the Paycheck Recovery Act was one approach that most countries in Europe and in Asia and other places have taken. But unfortunately, we didn't enact that. So I'm still trying on the Paycheck Recovery Act and that kind of an approach, and we'll see how far I get. Speaker Pelosi is actually forming a select committee on this question about what are the kinds of approaches that meet the scale of the crisis, just as you said. But we're going to have to act very quickly, and probably in the short term, it's going to be more assistance like what we signed into law with the COVID bill that allows people to pay rent and utility bill, and also helps rental property owners like you that are small mom and pops. So I will try to remember to make sure to keep talking about that in my comments. It's definitely something I really care about. There's so much assistance that needs to go out there, and so I'm glad you asked the question to give me a chance to talk about what we're doing there. Thank you so much, Marilyn.
Thank you, Marilyn, and thank you, Congresswoman. Before I turn it back over to the Congresswoman for any final words tonight, I want to remind everybody that you can dial *6 on your phone to be added to our newsletter, and you'll get the Congresswoman's updates to your email. So that's *6 to sign up for our newsletter updates. Congresswoman, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out for the night.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you so much, everybody. I know we had a lot of questions that we couldn't get to, and we went over a few minutes just because I wanted to try and get to as many as I could. But I guess the only thing I really want to say is that our office is here to help you and to push for the kinds of policies that represent the values that are held so dear in the 7th Congressional District. And this is a really difficult time in our country. We have so many crises before us. We always knew we had the inequality crisis. We know we have now on top of that the COVID crisis, the health pandemic, the economic crisis, and now, of course, dealing with an insurrection, which even just 2 weeks ago would have been inconceivable. So I'd like to just say to all of you that are fearful for your homes, for your families, for your futures, that democracy is something that requires us to work every day to really keep. And I think we saw the fragility of democracy last week. And frankly, we've been seeing the fragility of democracy for years as the gap between rich and poor has been getting larger, as the opportunity for people has been shrinking in our country. And I believe that the only way that changes is for people to be engaged, to be involved, and to really put yourself, your whole self, into preserving and making better our country, into preserving our democracy and making our country better. So thank you so much for doing that. I believe we will come out of this, but it's not going to be an easy road. I'm not going to lie. And at the same time, I think Seattle, our region, all of the cities and towns in the 7th District are examples of some of the best things in the country that can be done, from being the first city to pass a $15 minimum wage, to working on gun reform, and so many other things, paid family leave, and so much more, humane immigration policy. So thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for electing me to represent you. And please call our office if there's anything at all that we can do to help you navigate what you're going through in your families. Give us your stories. Write to me. Tell me what you think. I am listening hard, and I promise to continue working hard for all of you. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the town hall tonight. I want to leave everybody with our number. If you want to give us a call for anything you need, like the Congresswoman said, our number is 206-674-0040. That's 206 674-0040. Thank you to everyone for dialing in tonight and for joining us, and we hope you have a good evening.